The year is 2025, the day is pretty irrelevant, and the month is June. Me and my dad are going on a camping trip, and unbeknownst to either of us, said campsite does not have cell service. But this isn't a problem because I've got a modded Switch. Here's the thing with a modded Switch there's a slight catch. So, the way a Switch is actually modded is through a hardware exploit. Released in 2015, the Switch 1 uses the Tegra X1 chip from Nvidia. This bad boy, and I do mean bad because it enabled modding, has a security flaw. No, I'm too stupid to understand the details, but basically, you short some pins in the Joy-Con rails with a piece of tinfoil, or a jig if you're less of a risk taker than I am, and bam, you put the console in recovery mode. This recovery mode isn't special though, this is something any Switch can do. But recovery mode is where the flaw comes in. See, older variants of the Switch are unpatched, meaning that in recovery mode, you can insert a payload. And from there, modding ensues. You can load a bootloader called Hekate, and the Switch is your oyster. A modded Switch can load legally dumped games, boot up Linux, or even Android. And here's the catch. Remember how I said before that in order to inject a payload, you need to put the Switch into recovery mode? Well, if you're in an environment where, for whatever reason, you can't inject a payload, then the Switch is stuck in recovery mode. Until you can get a payload injected, it's basically bricked. I think you can see where I'm going with this. Now, if you boot the Switch into the custom version of Horizon OS, a modded version of the normal OS the Switch uses, it can sleep like normal. But in the event the battery dies fully, it goes right back into recovery mode. At first, I thought I must have somehow let the battery die because I tried to turn it on and got a black screen of nothing.
He's dead, Jim.
Turns out, there was a bug with an app called SysClock. SysClock allows you to modify the clock speeds for your Switch for a heck of a performance boost. But on newer versions of the Switch firmware, it prevented the Switch from sleeping properly. Guess who had a newer firmware and didn't update SysClock? So yeah, that was what actually happened. Some of you are thinking, but wait, can't you inject a payload using Ricado on your phone? First of all, nerd. Second of all, yes, provided you have a USB-C to USB-C cable. Fortunately, I have 3 of these cables. Unfortunately, I did not bring any of these 3 cables. So, long story short, Switch was out of the running for the weekend. But when all hope seems lost, the 3DS swoops in to save the day. Here's the thing. I think the 3DS is a great console, arguably even greater than the Switch. Sure, it isn't playing the latest games anymore, but to be fair, neither is the Switch. But also, this thing is the last handheld console that was actually portable. Am I the only one who thinks the Switch and even Steam Deck make for kind of lousy devices in terms of actual portability? First of all, you basically need a battery pack. 3 hours of battery life is pretty pathetic. Secondly, the Switch is too fucking big. Does anyone else worry about carrying a Switch in their pocket and it either looking like a C4 bomb or a brick of cocaine? I mean, at this point, a case is practically required. Compare this to the GigaChad 3DS. I could shove this thing up my ass with enough effort. According to some quick Google searches, that's a bad idea. But anyway, the battery life isn't much better, but I don't know if my Switch is fucked or what, but it sure as hell feels better. On top of the battery, the 3DS didn't struggle to run so many of its own games. Yes, Pokemon had some struggle moments, but beyond that, most of its first-party games had no problems. Anyway, 3DS cockstroking aside, my 3DS is also modded. Problem is, I had never really planned on using it on this trip. I always bring it as a backup plan in case my Switch isn't appealing or the battery dies, it's 3DS to the rescue, but I didn't plan on actually using it, so did I bring the case of games? No. Did I have games loaded on it? Yeah. Any I actually wanted to play? No. So I figured, alright, I'll download a game on the way. I decided to ask around for a game, and I decided to try getting Etrian Odyssey from 8shot, I mean my legally dumped game copy that I found in the seat cushion. Anyway, I started downloading it, and it's taking a while. Anyone who's used the 3DS knows that it is slow as shit at downloading anything. The car ride is 3 hours, and I didn't know this at the time, but we wouldn't have internet there, so this was a race. Would this download finish before we got out of cell service? Fortunately, it did. Unfortunately, I realized I had downloaded the demo. Why in the world I mean a legally dumped game archive would have demos on it, I don't know, but it does. So I tried downloading the full game, it was too late. The download got interrupted about a quarter way through, and from then on it just kept failing. So I was stuck with what I had, which wasn't much. I had Digimon World redigitized, which I wasn't in the mood for, and Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, which, while a great game, is pretty awful to play on a 3DS without dual sticks. And the only one left was the cart in the console, Pokemon Moon, so I played it. And you know what? I had a great time. The Alola region holds up great, and I'm reminded that I still love my 3DS. But it also did something else. I spent the whole weekend actually gaming. As a gamer, I want to, play video games. I don't want to scroll social media for hours on end, and I don't want to constantly check Discord. I want to play games. If you told me I had been scrolling Tumblr for 4 hours, I'd be like, wow, that sucks. But if you told me I played 3D Land for 4 hours, I'd be like, oh, that fucks. I try to be somewhat mindful of how I'm spending my time with technology, even if I'm not always good at keeping track. I think this is a big benefit of a device like 3DS these days. The 3DS is for one thing and one thing only, gaming. You can't open a 3DS and start scrolling because it doesn't do that. The 3DS also introduces a barrier to scrolling because if you want to start scrolling, you have to put down the 3DS, pick up your phone, turn it on, unlock it, and open the app. For me, I find just that little barrier is enough to turn my brain off of the idea. After this camping trip, I decided to transfer over to a 128GB microSD card and start loading it full of games. Recently, I've had it plugged in and it sits powered on my desk. I've been slowly making my way through 3D Land and it's been kind of a godsend. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, I pick up my 3DS instead of scrolling. To me, that is a win. For one, I think long-form video games can be good for attention spans, and for two, it's just something I'd rather spend time on. I love my computer, but the problem is that it isn't just for gaming. It's a computer. Hot pictures of Lusamine are just a few clicks away, and that's a problem. Alt-tabbing is the murder of attention spans. My problem with the Switch, on the other hand, is sort of ironic. While it can play many more games than the 3DS, it has significant overlap with my computer. I'm playing through XCOM 2 right now, a game I also own on my Switch. Could I play it there? Sure, but I'd much rather play it on my PC with better graphics, load times, and mods. And granted, I can play 3DS games on my PC with special tools, but my brain is lazy and the thought of simply flipping open a 3DS is much more appealing than setting it up on my PC. And let's not get it twisted. The 3DS, especially when modded, has a massive library. Pokemon all the way up to 3DS, most Fire Emblem up to 3DS, Star Fox 64 3D, Etrian Odyssey, Ever Oasis, 3D Land, New Super Mario on DS and 3DS, the list goes on. And again, the benefit here is that I'm not thinking, well, I could play this on my PC. Apart from what I said earlier, the dual screen of the DS and 3DS can also be weird on a PC, so it's nicer to have it on real hardware. The other nice thing about a 3DS is that the games are small. On a Switch, especially a modded one with a partition for Android and for Linux, a 128 card is pretty much nothing. But on a 3DS, that shit may as well be infinite storage space. I don't have to worry about having space for Switch games because it's an entirely separate SD card. If you want to load up every game on a franchise, you can do it and it will barely take up anything. But on top of that, the 3DS actually has good build quality. To this day, my Circle Pad still works flawlessly, and unlike a Switch, it doesn't have Joy-Cons that constantly disconnect off the damn rails or have shitloads of drift. This thing is from an era when Nintendo was still known as the Nokia of the gaming industry. And finally, the modability. So in my last video, I included an anti-sponsor, Opera GX. I wasn't sure if I wanted to actually include this section because I didn't want to come off as annoying, but from what I gathered, people seemed to respond well to it, so I'll be doing it again. So, without further ado, today's anti-sponsor is the Epic Games Store. Now, you've probably heard of the Epic Games Store, you've probably gotten a few games from the Epic Games Store, but what's their problem? First of all, let's say you come from a standpoint of, well, doesn't Steam need competition? And yes, I would agree with that. While Valve, as a company, does make many consumer-friendly decisions, they are just that, a company. Right now, they align with what we want, but they're on our side until they're not. Sometimes they offer a robust refund policy, and sometimes they make CSGO gambling. But my problem with the Epic Games Store is how they try to compete with Steam. They aren't trying to compete by having a better service, but they try to cheat. They pay developers out of pocket to put their games on Epic before Steam, and they give out bribes in the form of free games to entice people over. On top of that, there already is a platform that competes directly with Steam, and it's existed since 2008, GOG. GOG, or Good Old Games, is another digital storefront that sells games, and guess what? It offers something Steam doesn't always: DRM-free games. All of the games on GOG are DRM-free, and you can launch them without any kind of launcher. Steam does offer this for some games, but I think you can see where I'm coming from here. By buying a game on GOG, not only are you supporting a platform that is trying to compete with Steam, but one that does so by providing a service Steam often doesn't. On top of this, GOG is good for games preservation because the lack of DRM means that even if GOG goes down, the games will still be completely playable if you have them downloaded. So, if you want to support a competitor to Steam, support GOG, not Epic. Back to the video. Yes, a Switch can be modded, but not as easily, and the whole injection thing can be pretty annoying. Plus, not every Switch is unpatched. On the flip side, any 3DS can be modded, even with the latest firmware. Modding lets you back up saves, have custom themes, and the ability to inject Virtual Console games with your own ROMs. Want to play Fire Emblem on the GBA? Rather than emulate it, you can use Virtual Console injections, which basically makes it play like it was natives, so you don't need to worry about emulator performance. I just love owning hardware and feeling like I actually own it. It's my device and I'll do whatever the hell I want with it. So yeah, the 3DS is kind of the GOAT. Or hell, dedicated gaming devices in general are the GOAT. It doesn't have to be a 3DS. You got a PSP? Time to mod that shit, baby. A GBA SP? Get it all in one cart and play for months on one battery charge. And hey, if you don't have a computer, a Switch is a great option. Any kind of gaming-only device is handy to avoid scrolling. Instead of picking up your phone to scroll, pick up a 3DS to finish just one more level of Mario, or play just one more map in Fire Emblem. It's time to stop scrolling and start gaming. Thanks for watching.